Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today. Today, we're going to be talking about tackling unique fleet management challenges in higher ed. Today, I'm going to be your presenter, and my name is Kathy Wellik, and I'm a CAFM, and I'm the Senior Client Success Manager with Agile Fleet. With that, I am responsible for all of the university and higher education accounts at Agile Fleet. Having these quarterly webinars that are geared specifically towards universities is part of the added package to be able to better serve the university and higher education needs. Please feel free to add any comments or questions that you have along the way in the chat. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about how we're unique, best practices, how your FMIS can help you with your challenges and solutions, reports, audit controls, client success tools, and have time for Q&A. So how are we unique? As we know, the university setting is a completely different ball of wax when it comes to fleets. We have unique drivers. Often our insurance is different because we're oftentimes self-insured. We have locations of travel all over the world, potentially. We have policies, recruiting rules, research, student org travel, and many more. And we're going to look at each of these unique challenges and what we can do to work with those challenges. So what's at stake? Now, we took out the names of these particular universities just because, but the University of Blank was audited by the state auditor in 2022, which found that the university's fleet management was ineffective and lacked poor oversight, resulting in poor management practice and inefficient use of resources. That's a current story, and while that may not seem like anything major to most people, that is really a major in the fleet world. You have to respond to state auditors. You have to be cost effective. You have millions of dollars of assets in your fleet. And if you're not properly maintaining and making sure that your users have training and properly maintaining vehicles, if you're not taking care of your fleet and doing your due diligence, it could cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for your fleet and for your university due to negligence. So drivers are so unique in higher ed, and these challenges can be very time consuming if you don't have policies to back them up. So who can drive your vehicles, and what are the requirements for the drivers to go through prior to driving? In the fleets at the universities, you have full-time employees, you have part-time employees, you have student employees, grad students, volunteers. Maybe you allow student organization members to be able to drive, and they may or may not have to have a professor with them on a trip. There's also student teachers, folks that work on farms that need to pull trailers. There's high school students that may come to campus to attend special sessions. And you may even have K through 12 transportation that you need to attend at like we did at my former school, where we dealt with the school for the blind and school for the deaf. And you also may have CDL drivers. And if they go over state lines, how does that affect your fleet and how does that affect your drivers? All things you need to consider. So with all the different drivers, how do you insure your fleet? Are your vehicles self-insured? Are they privately insured? Or do you maybe do best practice of a combination of both? So if you allow student organizations to travel, do you need to have a separate insurance policy for them? How is insurance handled for outside rentals? Are there certain age requirements on your outside rentals, such as an enterprise contract? They had to be a different age to be able to use the vehicles than the age they had to be for our shared motor pool fleet. These are all things that you need to have your policy and insurance geared towards, so you can make sure that your fleet is running smoothly? Also, how is the equipment that may be added to your vehicle in your vehicle covered? We had a certain situation where we had a new pickup and they had a topper on the back and it was full of equipment. 2 batteries were in the back of that, and the batteries arced and started the vehicle on fire. They smelled the smoke, they got out of the vehicle, they saw the fire. It was a total loss by the time the fire department got there. Our customer wanted their equipment replaced immediately. Well, that equipment is not part of the vehicle insurance. So you really need to make sure that your drivers understand what's covered and what's not. And if you don't know what's covered or what's not at your particular fleet, I invite you to reach out to your risk management person or to your business and finance person so you can have those conversations. Now let's talk about where your vehicles are traveling. Are your vehicles traveling on campus and maybe you need geofencing with GPS to make sure they stay where they're supposed to be? Or are your vehicles traveling out of state? Are your CDL drivers going out of state lines so it's intrastate instead of interstate for the rules to apply on the CDL? Do you have travel in other countries, such as Canada or Mexico? For Canada, I know we had to send a letter for each trip and acknowledge that they had permission to have our vehicle in the country, as well as why they were there and when and how they would return. When we had a vehicle going to Mexico for research, we had to not only send 1 spare tire, but 3 spare tires. And don't forget the extra insurance. So we made sure that the same truck was going on the same project every time it went down to Mexico, since we had to have those additional insurance policies on the truck. So in your fleet, take a few minutes and think, do you have vehicles in other countries as well? There's also research projects in Uganda and different farms and so forth that partner. All of these are things you have to consider as a fleet manager. Policy. Policy is so important and it provides clear expectations, a safer work environment, reduced insurance premiums, reduced court costs and legal fees, reduced loss of use, a positive public image showing that you care about your employees in your fleet, increased employee satisfaction, increased safety of other motorists on the road, and it really optimizes vehicle operation costs. But policy is only as good as the acknowledgement of it. So you need to make sure you have your drivers acknowledge policy on a regular basis. Other things to think about. I know you're thinking, why are we showing football players? Well, at the universities, the athletic teams are a very important part of the collegiate experience. And if your athletic department is recruiting these athletes to come to your university or college, you need to know if there's certain rules that you must follow. Can athletic recruits be in the same vehicle as other recruits? Are there other rules about recruiting? And then there's also the other type of recruiters, the academic recruiters that are recruiting for high schools, etc. The needs of both types of recruiters are very different. The football players like the Suburbans or Tahoes, the academic recruiters need mid-sized cars. Make sure you know your audience. Research is so broad. You may be going to the field to test plots. You may be going to farms for animal veterinarian training. You may be testing satellite communications or testing rockets out in the middle of Utah. The best part of working for a university is that every day is different. But these unique challenges also offer needs for different upfits, such as a veterinarian box on a truck that allows you to do surgery in the middle of the field, and potentially exceptions to rules. For example, we had a wine and beer class at our university, so they have to have an exception to be able to carry alcohol in university vehicles. Schedules. Schedules are so important and constantly changing at universities. Short trips are used a lot for everyday meetings. It might be practicum students. Then you have seasonal rentals that have summer research projects, permanently leased vehicles or assigned vehicles, and then also having overflow for peak times. Having efficient access to vehicles 24/7, 365 is vital to have a great fleet. The more you can share vehicles, the more you will save money. Do you allow student organizations to travel? Is there an age limit? Do you have them fill out certain medical waivers? Tell them about the student organization that you have at your particular institution. Do you allow the student organizations to go ahead and travel by themselves? Do they have to have a professor or full-time employee with them? I know it's important to have waivers and know where they're going, what they're doing. We had a couple incidences where we had to go back on those waivers and find out, do those particular students have allergies if there's an accident and they had to be taken to the hospital? There's a lot to think about in the different scenarios. Training. What type of training do you require for your drivers? Is there classroom training that you require? Do you require them to do hands-on driving? Some folks have a driver simulator training, and some have a written test or a combination of all of the above. It's important to make sure that your drivers will get there safely and return safely. And vehicles. Now, your vehicles might not look exactly like this, but remember, most universities are a city within a city, and many of you have law enforcement vehicles, you have utilities, you have food services, you have cars, trucks, the list goes on. So how do you know which vehicles you need to replace and what is the right mix of vehicles for your particular fleet? That's where your fleet management information system can help. And how can it help? Your FMIS can help in many ways to navigate you through these unique challenges. These challenges include, but are not limited to, communicating the policy. This is so important to set the expectations of the customers. Acknowledge the policy. This will assist you if you've ever had a bad accident or legal challenge. Communication of all things fleet. Not only is policy important to communicate, but also being able to communicate about the reservations, the special one-off items, and so forth to the fleet clients. 24/7, 365 availability for vehicles. The greater the ease of use for customers, the more efficient your university is. That can save you tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions, over the years, depending on the size of your fleet. Fuel can help tell your story and help identify potential fraud. Maintenance, have vital records to have, especially in case of an accident. I know one accident that we had that I can think of in the past. I had to come up with every work order on that particular vehicle that was in the accident, every driver that had ever driven that vehicle, if the MVRs were checked for all those drivers, when the driver that had the incident's MVR was last checked, and so forth. That's a lot of information to keep track of. So make sure your FMIS system can help. Total cost of ownership is so important in your rate setting. Many of you have to rate set and not make a profit, but just be, come out at zero at the end of the year. So you need to have accurate records to be able to set those rates. You need user controls to help keep the right people in the right vehicles. And everything in one system is so important so you can reduce costs, keep audit controls, and keep everyone on the same page. And feedback helps to make sure our customers are happy. Even if we don't have customers, If we don't have customers, then we don't have jobs, right? So it's important to get that feedback to make sure they're happy. Otherwise, they may choose to take their personal vehicle. So what tools can you implement in Fleet Commander to help you do all of this? Place policies in Fleet Commander. Everyone has a home page. Everyone has a spot that says policies, but oftentimes people don't take the time to fill that in. If you need help doing that, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help guide you and direct you to be able to get that done. Once the policies are placed in Fleet Commander, that's where you can communicate this policy. And you also need to have the ability for folks to fully click into the complete policy if you only have partial policies on your website. So you can add links, you can add words, you can add pictures, but it's so important that you have the information there. Then the most critical part is have drivers electronically agree to the policies on a regular basis. So require your users to acknowledge the policy. This is already in your enterprise settings. You just need to make sure that you have it turned on and at what point you want them to do the acknowledgement. So for this example, every 6 months when the driver signs on to make a reservation or to do something, they have to re-acknowledge the policy. That really helps protect you later on if something goes wrong and you need to go back and discuss with that driver about the policy and what might have happened. Identifying allowed drivers and passengers. Again, what tools can you use in Agile Fleet to help with all these unique different drivers that you have in these challenges? Many higher ed institutions have a wide variety of drivers that are unique compared to these other fleets. So to help make sure the drivers behind the wheel have the proper permission and training, let's take a deeper look into Fleet Commander to see what that looks like. In Fleet Commander, you can customize the usage types based on the types of drivers you have the training qualifications they have completed. So on this example, these groups that are allowed for these users at this fleet have a standard safety training, golf carts, 12-passenger van training, CDL, and emergency services. So this particular user could get access to the standard safety training vehicles that are listed under that requirement, and also the vehicles that are listed to have a CDL requirement. But they would not be able to get a 12-passenger van because they do not have that training. What screening requirements do you have for drivers? Do you require MVR checks, motor vehicle record checks? Or do you require past driving experience? Which that one I can honestly say I've never quite fully understood, because it's oftentimes at universities you have folks coming from many different countries. And so being able to identify that driving experience is a hard thing to do because you don't have documentation from those other countries. So when looking at past driving records, how many tickets are too many tickets? If drivers receive a ticket in between an MVR check, do they have to report the ticket to you? Do they have to complete remedial training if they get in trouble or get a ticket? These are all things that you should cover in your policy, and I highly recommend that you involve other stakeholders, such as legal, risk management, and potentially even your police department, as they might be able to help you doing the motor vehicle record checks. The most common thing to track in motor vehicle record checks, or MVR, is the requirement upon hire and during a certain time frame thereafter. So for example, every year. So fleet staff can manually update data, or you can choose to automate your data. But you would go into your users, you would click the pencil under Manage Users, and you would update the last agency check date. and the license expiration date. This is where you keep track of the MVRs for the drivers. What training policies do you have for your drivers? Some higher ed communities require vehicle safety training, 15-passenger van training, maybe remedial training, just to name a few. But with Fleet Commander, you can track all those trainings easily and grant proper vehicle use permissions based on the training policy by user. So let's track the training in Fleet Commander by adding the certifications onto the user profile. You can enter the certification type, date completed, if there's an expiration date, and if it's active and if it's required. You can also put copies of them in if there's a completed certificate that you would like to do under Files under the user. Access groups help to make sure drivers can be assigned vehicles that they do not have the proper, to make sure drivers can't be assigned vehicles, if they don't have the proper certification. So, example again on here, the access groups are standard, live training, or 15-passenger van training. So this particular person would not be able to get a 15-passenger van because they don't have the appropriate training. Public notes may also be included in reports and private notes under each particular user. I would recommend you use this if you're tracking maybe complaints about a driver, but make sure when you do it that you probably put them under private reports, because then it's only available while viewing or editing and it's not included in reports. So public notes are included in reports potentially, private notes do not. So what kind of reports do we have that we can go ahead and pull that will help us make sure that our drivers are current? Our driver license currency. And I know the first thing I think of in currency is money, but no, it's how long their driver's license is currently good for. So you have the data set up with your drivers in the Fleet Commander system, but how do you know they have a current license? You can run the driver license currency report. And as you can see, you can do just enabled drivers, disabled, pending. You can sort by username or user's name. You can go into HTML or Excel. There's multiple different ways that you can do it based on your specific need. This is what the report looks like when it comes back. So as you can tell, Dwayne on that second line there, his license expires on June 30th of 26, and his last agency check date was January 1st of 2023. There is notes for any explanation of restrictions or anything like that. As you will also notice, the driver's license number is not filled in. We highly recommend that you do not keep driver's license records on file. Anymore, that is just like having a social security number on file. It is not recommended that you do that. The next report is the user certification currency. So who has all those different types of certifications, such as a 15-passenger van test? You can run the user certification currency. This goes and tells you who all has that particular driving certificate. So here you can see that John, who's on the call, did a good job completing his driver safety training for us. I've also told fleet staff that when you do things, you need to make sure you can explain what you did to audit, and it needs to make sense. We call it the Des Moines Register test in Iowa because the Des Moines Register is the main newspaper. You want to make sure you stay out of the news and keep your nose clean and have accurate records and are doing a good job. So it's important to have checks and balances. And Fleet Commander system has the tools you need to make sure the auditors are satisfied, such as the User System Activity Report. When you run this report, you can look at the individual user and any activity they've done for a period of time, the user table, the asset table, and the reservation table. So in this particular example, for the period of time that was put in, this person had only made changes on the reservation table in the system. They'd not done anything specific of like adding a vehicle or changing a user. So they are only showing information in the reservation table. But you can take a period of time and it will tell you any activity that that particular driver has done. The audit log report is another report that is so helpful. The audit log report shows all activity that has happened in the system and who did the activity. So not only does it tell you who the affected user was for the particular activity, but it has the logged by or who made that change to that particular user or reservation. Another report that's available is the User Detail Extra report. And this is the last one we'll look at today. And even though this is the last report that we're going to talk about today, remember there's over 100 reports in Fleet Commander, and there's no way we can go over all the reports in 1 hour. The User Detail Extra report provides all information about the individual user. This report may save you thousands of dollars when something goes wrong, and you have to have proof that your driver acknowledged the policy on a certain date and a certain time. So with those tips and tricks and tools and reports, we also want to remind you some other client success tools that we have here at Agile Fleet to help you succeed. Please remember that at agilefleet.com, we have several online resources. We have webinars, user groups, peer sharing. We also have a fleet management blog, and we also have a brand new website. The new website is phenomenal compared to the old website, and I really invite you to go to the site and check it out. We also have Workshop Wednesdays, which happen the third Wednesday of every month. Then we have the new university educational webinars, where we're going to try and bring you information specifically to the higher ed community. And don't forget the Fleet Commander User Conference. That will be in the fall of 2023, and it's very important that you plan now to send you and your staff to the conference. That is where they can get firsthand information from our staff. Other clients will be there, client presentations. You get to really bond with other people using the system. And when you expand your knowledge with the Workshop Wednesday, you also have access to the previous Workshop Wednesdays. Managing your fleet policy last May has a lot of some of the same things that we talked about today as far as the fleet policy acknowledgement. So if you want more or additional information, you can go ahead and follow that link. March's next Workshop Wednesday is scheduled for March 15th, 2023 at 2 p.m. and we do hope that you will join us for that as well. And later this week, you will also be seeing the newsletter come out for the university higher ed setting. Does anybody have any questions? The main thing I wanted to show you today, while we're waiting if anyone has questions in the chat, is oftentimes I see that people have the system, but they've never fully implemented it. And so that's what I'm here for. I want to help you implement the system so it's working for you. Many of the tools are right in front of you. They're in the system. You just need to know how to find them and how to use them. So thank you for joining me so we can talk about some of those things and we can be able to share ideas with each other, because that's how we will succeed. I want to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to join me and allowing me the opportunity to help us each learn and grow. If you have specific topics that you would like in the next quarter's webinar, please feel free to reach out to me as my information's on the screen. Also, a reminder that there's multiple fleet events coming up. There is the NTEA in Indianapolis, Indiana, March 8th through 10th, and there will also be a NAFA Heartland chapter meeting during that event. There's a Big Ten and Friends Parking and Transportation Conference in conjunction with PI, and that is in Schaumburg, Illinois, in March 27th through 30th. And there's the NAFA INE in Baltimore, Maryland, April 17th through the 20th. And I will be there for all of those events. And I hope to see you there as well.